Hey everyone, Glenn here from Alter Egos. A bit of housekeeping this week before we start the episode. Firstly, we just want to acknowledge that we've recommenced our deck building series called Experimental Research. We're currently 2 episodes into that series, and we will continue to be releasing episodes each and every week on Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. That series is really just focused on interviewing and discussing different decks from those around the community. And it's really an open invitation to anyone out there that wants to share a deck list on a forum other than the Deck Builder site to really come on and just share some insights into how they approach deck building and why they built their deck a certain way. So if you would like to be involved in that series, if you would like to know more about what we're doing there, you can check out our first 2 episodes in our podcast feed, or alternatively, you can email us in the email that I place in the episode description each and every episode. Secondly, we recently had lead designer Caleb Grace on our show to discuss the recently released The Rise of Red Skull campaign box. That really is our launching point for our ongoing series on The Rise of Red Skull. And you'll be seeing a lot more content in regards to that game box over probably the next 1 to 2 months. We know there's a long time between campaign boxes, at least 5 to 6 months. And so you can expect that series to kind of not be dragged out so much, but really it'll just be that we spend, each week kind of focusing in on one element of that scenario box to really provide some thoughtful commentary on what's been included there. So this week is our first week of that series, and really what it's all about this week is about the campaign elements that went into The Rise of Red Skull. And moving on from there, the week after, we'll commence discussing the different scenarios that you can find inside the box, with the last part of the series focusing in on the 2 heroes that came in the campaign box. We hope you enjoy the content that we put out for that. We know it probably will be a rather long series, and so we hope that keeps your engagement. And so as a consequence of that, our discussion around Kang, or the Once and Future Kang scenario pack, as it's called, will probably be delayed until November or December, because often myself and Joey like to play a scenario quite a few times before we provide our thoughts or discussion around the product. So we hope you all enjoy the release of Kang as it comes out. And then, going into November and December, hopefully Ant-Man and the Wasp, we start seeing those come out. But yeah, just expect that at least for the next month or so, the Alter Egos, aside from a few guest episodes, will be mainly focused in on The Rise of Red Skull, and we hope you enjoy that journey with us. The last thing I just need to say before the episode gets started is that none of this could be possible without our patrons that support us month to month. So I just want to say a big thank you once again to those that are continuing to support the show in that way. And so this month it's a huge thanks to Andrew, James, Scott, Alan, and Matthew for all joining the Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you to all our regular patrons that have been supporting us since we launched on that platform. All your support and energy and efforts and just kind messages have kept us going during these past few months. And if you're interested, you can get involved via a link in the episode description as well. But once again, just a huge thanks to everyone there. And we hope that everyone enjoys the content that we produce heading into this final quarter of 2020. So without further ado, thank you for listening to this bit of housekeeping. And I really hope you enjoy our discussion on the campaign elements. Joey's audio, I'm sorry, got a little bit upset with the recording program that we use, but I've checked the audio for the episodes following, and everything is crystal clear. So bear with us this week, and following that, I hope you enjoy the Rise of Red Skull discussions. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 20 of Alter Egos. I'm your host, Glenn, and with me, as always, is Joey, and this is a podcast focused on Marvel Champions, the living card game. Joey, how's it going this evening?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's been a while since we last got to talk on the podcast. How's your experience with The Rise of Red Skull been so far?
Been pretty good. I've quite enjoyed my time with it, playing the new heroes and some of the old ones as well while I've been at it. And I think I've mostly just been playing the campaign, just going through it one after another in like solo expert. But it's been enjoyable enough.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've been playing the campaign, because that's what we're going to be talking about tonight is the campaign side of the scenario box. And yeah, it's great to just have additional scenarios, I guess, and to have them connected with a slight narrative and, you know, that additional comic book and whatnot. What's been your general impression so far with the, I guess, overall narrative and campaign elements introduced?
Yep. So the overall narrative, it feels like an old school comic, like a maybe late 80s, maybe 90s comic. Like there's, it seems like there's stakes, but there's not really type thing. Like the storylines I'm thinking of are things like Maximum Carnage, Age of Apocalypse. Trying to think of at least one more, but regardless, it's not the more modern form of storytelling where there will be natural consequences. This feels like it's all contained in this one box for the most part, which is, I guess, what they're going for. They're not trying to set up their own Marvel universe. They're trying to play off the existing ones, and it's in that respect, it works quite well. It's been all right with the narrative side of it. The comic, I feel, added a lot more than I thought it was going to. I was expecting to just like flick through it like the first time and then like give it a read because it's there, obviously. But I found even on like my third or fourth playthrough, I was still reading the comic, actually looking over the comic art panels and stuff and seeing what Madam Hydra was up to between the things, because I think she's in the first few, she's actually like you can trace her running away, which was kind of interesting. How have you found the narrative side of the new expansion?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what to expect after playing Arkham and Lord of the Rings. I really you have to set aside, I guess, a lot of the preconceptions of those and come into it with a really open mind. And I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, with I think I've mentioned before, but just I really appreciated that the designer got to write a story, and it just feels very much in theme with what you'd hope for a Rise of Red Skull story. You've got Taskmaster like becoming like a chief of police, and like Crossbones in a getaway scene, with Zola doing his thing on I think it's Stratton Island. And the thing I kind of appreciated the most was, combined with the comic book, a lot of the flavor text and art in the later scenarios very much reflected the narrative or campaign elements that you'd been seeing. I particularly enjoyed Zola for that. I really feel like Zola to me is like the it's sort of like Game of Thrones, I guess. It's like the 9th episode. Like it's like where everything kind of comes to a climax in the sense of the difficulty and the theme, and I guess a bit of the like a lot of the elements that have been introduced kind of all come together at that moment and form a fantastic scenario. And then to capstone it off with a boss fight afterwards with Red Skull is done quite well, I thought. And I think now that I've played through it enough times, I kind of like that there's no sort of like, if you lose, here's a different narrative or different effect. I kind of like the really straightforward thing of, if you win, you progress forwards, and here's the one narrative that we're trying to tell through the comic books. So that's been what I've found with that. In terms of the mechanics, I think for a first campaign box, I am impressed or pleasantly surprised, I guess, with how deep it felt, even though you're getting very little, if that makes sense. Like the one basic upgrade choice and the one additional sort of tech card that kind of is in your back pocket throughout the campaign added a bit of strategic depth to the scenario and offered a lot of discussion during each game that I thought was really positive to the experience. And for me, the mechanic I engage with the most is probably the persistent health. So that's probably my overall impressions, and I'm really looking forward to what they do with the Galaxy Most Wanted, but I also am very happy with what they did here, and like you've been doing, I've been playing through the campaign more times than I thought I would be. Yeah. What's your favorite mechanic from it?
My favorite mechanic is probably the tech cards, mostly because I would put the stat upgrades, the conditions, to be my favorite mechanic from it, except for the fact that the plus HP is super awkward from a rules perspective in expert, but so that makes the tech cards edge it out a little bit, because I think the tech cards are really well balanced. Most of them hit around this balance point where I would rate them at about 5 resources of value, which makes sense because one of them is just draw 5 cards. But depending on your character and depending on how you're built, different ones become actually better or worse. Like the one where you ready in heal 3, I think it is, or 4. I can't remember how much you heal on that one. In most characters, that's going to be about 5 value, 5 resources of value. But in like Spider-Woman, if you use it on a turn when you get up to like 4 or 5 on your base stats because of your ability, you can actually generate insane value with that. And like all the other ones besides the draw 5 card ones, and even that one a little bit, there's some shenanigans with like Captain Marvel that can make it a little make it better. But they all have like an edge case where they're better than just drawing the 5 cards, I feel, which is just interesting, super interesting from a balance perspective for those 4 cards. And in solo, because I've been playing it solo, those cards are taken to the exclusion of the others. So it's really good that they all have their use cases.
Yeah, I definitely like that in solo play you have a bit more flexibility or a little bit more replayability as well, where you could try going through with the tactical scanner and then go, hey, that was fun. I'm going to try a slightly different aspect, same hero. Let's try the emergency teleporter this time, because there's a particular ally that you want to beat Red Skull with in particular.
Yeah, the laser cannon, I think, going through it doesn't come off very good the first time you see it as a solo player, but the second time round, once you actually know what's going to happen further down the line, you can kind of see a reason for why the laser cannon is those exact numbers, and it just happens to be perfect for solo play, for dealing with the sleeper.
Yeah, certainly. And the other thing I quite like about them, and I think someone else mentioned to me, is that just this one decision meant that each game forwards you kind of sequenced or played in a different way, because often you wanted to hold on to it if you didn't know whether or not you would need it in the following scenario. So like when I was against Zola in some of my solo playthroughs, I really didn't want to use the tactical scanner that I selected, for instance, but there came a point where I was like, I might lose here, and so like let's just use it now. And then I got to Red Skull, and I really wish I had it. And I was like, oh, that's like an interesting point. Like maybe I should have saved it, and like that was a actual decision point that just one card made me do. And I thought that was a real positive to that experience.
Yeah. Non-expert, you probably should have just lost Zola, because you only get one shot at Red Skull.
That's true, but I was playing like ultra hard mode where like if I lost anything, I just would restart the whole campaign. Like yeah, this is something I like to do with my campaign playthroughs. But the basic conditions I thought were also interesting because of the hit points and sometimes the synergy in each one, like I don't know if you've tried the basic attack upgrade with Hawkeye, but having a base stat of 4 once you get the bow down felt great. Have you found any other interesting combinations of the base stats?
So the obviously 4 attack is great. The turning any of the 2 fort characters to 3 fort characters is just insane. Particularly Iron Man versus Red Skull. Getting double 3 forts is insane in solo because you're basically removing a scheme a turn. You can remove like 2 schemes a turn. It's or one that's really big, and that's just a really big thing. And particularly with the improved version drawing cards for removing schemes, I actually think the fraught one is probably the best of them, despite being the second lowest on HP. And I do not understand why the attack one is the lowest HP bonus. I think that actually, like the attack one is the only one I don't understand why the HP number is where it's at. The fraught one makes sense being kind of low because fraught is probably the most valuable stat, and the recover one having the most HP makes sense because it's because recover is probably the least useful of the 4 stats. The defend one I don't think is all that great until you get it improved, but once you get it improved, having it guaranteed like unflappable every turn on a defending focus character is insane. And it also makes unflappable easier to trigger as well. So if you're in like a protection Spider-Man, it's just so much card draw. Like protection Spider-Man defending and starting each turn with 8 cards in hand is insane. Generally 8, sometimes 7 because you have the backflip. So I think those all make sense. It's just the attack one, having 1 HP on the attack one, and it does matter because of a dev ruling. The rulebook kind of implied that you set your HP to what you were at previously, to a maximum of your printed max HP. That was implied by the rules, but there's a dev ruling saying that you actually apply the HP from these cards after you set your HP. So that HP number is basically healing value between each scenario for expert players. And the attack value, just getting less of it, particularly less than the fraught one, just seems super weird to me.
Yeah, I think they all have their places, and like I've enjoyed exploring each one. I agree with you that the thwart one is quite valuable, particularly in Iron Man in particular. Iron Man actually is a really interesting character for this campaign because the tech upgrades obviously give him a tech card to start with, so there is potential for you flipping even a turn earlier than you usually would. So I kind of it kind of made you not want to use it until until Red Skull because it gave you that extra hand size rather early. We didn't touch on it, but did you engage with, I guess we've been talking around it about how there's the persistent health and some of the dev rulings. Did you engage at all with the obligations that were put forward as well?
My level of engagement with the obligations was to read the obligations when I first got low on hit points and had the option to put them in, and then decide I'm never taking those cards. They look so bad. If you could choose which one, I could see particular cases where you would take one, or where you would take like one particular one over others. Like for instance, the what's the name of it? It's the anti-superhero laws or something.
Anti-hero propaganda. Yeah.
Is that the one that lowers the base stats by 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. That, like, I would take that on Miss Marvel any day of the week. Because it does nothing on her effectively. But the fact that you don't get to choose, it's always a random one of these. I just don't know if you could. I don't know if you can afford to take them to heal.
Imagine if you had all 4 in your deck. Like, I just think, like, I feel like if people are wanting a challenge in the community, I just challenge you to put all 4 of these in your deck when you're playing Marvel Champions. I think the punishment is that 1, they're stuck in your deck for the whole campaign, even if you remove them, and 2, they don't cycle themselves. So if you draw one, you're essentially all of them essentially say you're down 1 hand size for that turn.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I think Medical Emergency is actually an interesting card if you are trying to make the call, like allies, because you can kind of get more cards in the discard pile as like an edge case situation. But I love the art and I love the theme, and I like that they tell a story. Something Caleb said on the podcast was talking about how a lot of the art and flavor text is to try and reinforce the themes from the campaign box, and I think they all do a good job of that. And they definitely make me very hesitant. Like I play differently during a scenario to ensure that I don't have to consider taking these, which to me says that the persistent health mechanic is working. I think if you get defeated, you have to take one in expert. If the rest of your group wins, is that correct?
Yeah. If you get defeated and your team wins, which is so in solo, you get defeated, you lose, you replay. It's not a problem. But if your team is winning and you get defeated, yeah, you'll have to take one of them.
Yeah, so I kind of like that, and I like that these sort of additions to the game are maybe something that you can do to create your own campaign with, like the core set, for instance. You could very easily add this set of obligations and kind of run with it in the persistent health and be relatively okay. The one thing we didn't cover is the experimental weapons and sort of like how they carry across the campaign. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on your time with these and how you felt about them after a full campaign.
Yeah, the only thing, most of the time I just feel like the Retaliate one's a bit of a pain, just in general, particularly for ally decks, but it's not really that big a deal. The powered gauntlets, you just never the others, you just kind of, you dodge them the same way you always try and dodge attacks. Like you defend with allies, you try and stun, you try and get tough, etc. And they just, I feel like they don't impact my games that much unless I'm trying to do an unflappable deck. In unflappable decks, they can actually be kind of awful, although the attack numbers are kind of low for most of the villains in this set, so you can still deal with it. Because if you can't, you wouldn't be able to deal with the 4 attack from Rhino. Because most of the characters have 2 and there's +2 here, so you have the same problem. It's just kind of a non-issue for, chump block, stun, tough, heavy decks, which is generally where I try and get my damage reduction.
So you play on expert. How often are you taking 2 of these versus 3 or 4? Is that how? I can't remember how many you should get an expert. Two's the lowest, right?
Yeah, you get 2 as minimum. I have taken 4 every single time. I've not. His numbers on his main scheme are just so low. It's almost impossible to stall it.
Right.
The first one, you flip to Alter Ego once and you've lost. The second one, it's probably the same. He's got a 2 thwarts. He's putting 1 on the scheme by default. So he only needs a 2 pip. So you're only really going to have... you got probably like a 50-50 with most setups for whether it's going to be a flip that turn or stay on the other side, and that's assuming not allies, minions. If there's a minion, you might even have 100% chance that it's going to flip, depending on whether it's 2 forward or 1.
It's interesting you say that you felt like they weren't playing as big a role in the later scenarios, because I think maybe part of that is because Weapon Master, the modular set, isn't really threatening you or punishing you for keeping them in play, because that set's only really added back in, I think, with Taskmaster. But I did wonder if potentially if you added it in just additionally for curiosity's sake, whether that might influence how it feels across the scenario. Particularly even if you just shuffled in, not that this is official, but even if you just shuffled in the Treachery card, that surges if you have a weapon, like Weapon Master itself. I wonder if that would make the play pattern be altered slightly.
I don't know if it would, because maybe it would, but the the big thing with these cards is they themselves don't have surge. Um, so putting out an attachment that worst case costs like 2 resources to remove, right? Say the laser rifle, energy and fist to remove. It gives ranged. If you don't have a retaliate, which only like 3 characters is it have retaliate, and just +1 attack. That you could legitimately that comes out. That's not that scary of an effect most of the time. That's like the Rhino Horn if you don't have retaliate on your character. That's one of the least scary cards in Rhino's deck for the most part. And you've just you've lost one of your encounter cards to be this laser rifle that's not doing a lot against you, which I think it might actually be correct to let Crossbones get to the 3rd scheme in Expert, just so that these go in rather than the scary cards. The Red Skull cards and the Zola cards are actually pretty scary, and the Expert cards themselves are also very scary. Diluting the deck with these experimental weapons actually doesn't seem like the worst idea.
Yeah, it is interesting. I might try see what happens if you gave them surge. I personally find the exosuit pretty difficult to clear because sometimes you just don't draw the 3 resource type, and occasionally, yeah, it might surprise you that I don't have allies in play all the time. So I I sometimes am wondering about my life choices and deck building choices to where I just have to cop the additional damage, and I find that suit's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Same with the power gauntlets. I do find like sometimes I find that that is an interesting decision, but I can understand that in solo play that sometimes that decision point isn't there when otherwise it would be. I just wanted to get your thoughts also on a few of the other campaign mechanics that we see. So in Absorbing Man, there's the delay counters, and I wondered how many delay counters you're finding you're getting and how you felt about sort of that chase mechanic or the, I guess, time pressure that's in that scenario. How do you feel that was executed in this campaign box?
I find in the actual non-campaign version, the delay counters, when they get to 5, it starts really ramping up what he can do. I think 5 is a little high for when that triggers, but I think it still works. It's just that 5 is a lot of display counters, and I keep beating him with 4 on him. I think out of my first 2 runs for it, I got 4 and then 4. I think my 3rd run was 5, and my 4th run, which I thought was going to be awful because the deck was incredibly slow. I thought it was going to just completely blow out, and I was going to have tons on there, and it was just going to just remove the first scheme on Red Skull. I only got to like 6. So my records are like 4 to 6 for this, and I find that interesting. He just doesn't have a lot of ways to actually slow you down, despite the fact that's what his aim is. So you just rush him down, which makes sense. That's like it's tailor built to tell you to rush him down. But the delay counters, I'm normally, my worst case scenario, I spent 2 turns on the in that scary 5 range, and I'm yet to have a game where I've lost Red Skull's first scheme because I had too many delay counters from Absorbing Man.
Yeah, I think I've ranged from 2 till 7. I think that's my range, and I've enjoyed what it does. I think when you get to Red Skull, it is a bit of a surprise, and there is a lot of pressure if you are trying to maintain it on the first scheme. I'm just not sure how important it is to keep Red Skull in the first scheme. It seems like it's like a considered part of the design that even if it flips to the second one, you still have a bit of wiggle room. Obviously, not as much as you'd like, but it just ups the stakes a bit, which I quite like.
My biggest concern with keeping it on the first scheme is I was playing an Iron Man campaign, and I'm going to spend at least 1 turn in Alter Ego, and if I do that on the second scheme, I could lose the game pretty easily.
Yeah, well, I guess once you played it through once, you kind of know that, so you can kind of make sure that Absorbing Man's taken care of a bit earlier. But yeah, that's okay. What did you think of the Taskmaster sort of the ally rescue mechanic kind of being part of the scenario, and then just like the additional, you can keep the ally moving forward? Like, how instrumental do you think those allies are to succeeding in a campaign run through?
Succeeding in a campaign run through, they are not needed at all. I've done it with Hawkeye, where I even forgot to flip the. I did manage it. I did actually clear the side scheme in Zola, but I forgot to actually flip the basic to the improved version of the condition upgrade. I got none of the allies, and I used my tech upgrade against Zola. So I had nothing going into Red Skull, and I still cleared it. Um, so they're definitely not necessary. They are very nice if you can get them, because they're obviously zero cost allies with just insane stats on them. And the abilities are good if you can trigger them. Although that really depends on your building because they're random. It's weird. I did find that when I played against Taskmaster outside of the campaign, these were still there, but they really didn't feel like they were part of the scenario. Whereas Absorbing Man's delay counters felt like they were part of the scenario, even when you were playing in solo. But these allies felt like they were definitely part of the campaign that just happened to be there when you were playing them, not as campaign as well, which was an odd feeling.
It almost feels like a modular set. I feel like it's actually a pretty ripe idea for a modular set, to be honest. And it would be really interesting to be like, oh, look, you can have this captured by Hydra mechanic and throw it into any scenario. You can free some allies, and it's a way to make the game easier. Because sometimes I think it's nice to have some modular sets that you actively know can make both the experience more enjoyable, but also a bit easier for people to engage with.
Yep.
And the reason I think this set is quite good at that is because it's not 5 per player. It's literally just a flat 5 on the scheme. So if you're in 4 player, like, it's pretty easy to rescue the allies. That'd be my only comment on how I felt about that addition to the campaign.
Yep. I would like to point out though, out of all of these, White Tiger is just insane against Red Skull for clearing threat. Like 6 threat on the turn you play her, and then 3 threat the turn after. That's so good. It's almost worth probably not defending with her, just so you can get the extra 3/4 up the turn after as well.
Yeah, and I think that kind of hammered home to me what this campaign box is trying to do, and that it really is just a fun romp through a comic book, and that often it's just more important to have fun than be trying to min-max every single experience. And like I said, I felt like Zola was just that perfect combination of a lot of the elements that the box is trying to implement. Which, speaking of which, how did you find the Hydra prison mechanic? And also, I think it has the enemy engagement mechanic. Did you find either of those really did something to your campaign experience?
Yeah. So enemy engagement, I found that one to be, I haven't found that to change my playstyle at all. If I'm going to kill him and I can't clear the minions, I'm still just going to take the kill him and take the extra encounter card. 1 encounter card per player, because you engage with a minion it's not like a huge loss. It's better to get the game done and get onto the Red Skull than to worry about it. Although I normally try and clear everything I can anyway at the end of the match, and if you can get like an extra attack in and get a heal in, it's probably worth it. Like if you can clear it, it's worth it if you can do it. But if your board state's flooded, you might as well just kill him and go on to Red Skull. It's only going to be an encounter card. The bigger one, I thought, not the island, the what's the name of the card? The side scheme that locks up the Hydra prison. That's it. That locks up your thing. Because it doesn't have any ongoing effects. I actually considered just leaving it there and just not taking my my signature ally into the next scenario. When I was playing Hawkeye, because like Mockingbird, I could just replace with Mockingbird, and the the basic Mockingbird's pretty good.
That's what I said to. That's what I said to Caleb. I said, I said that was one of the things I kind of wanted to do was to get rid of the Mockingbird so I could play the other Mockingbird.
If you were playing solo, if you're playing solo Iron Man and you took the recovery upgrade, which I think is a valid choice, I think like all of these things are valid choices for playing the campaign. I would probably take the thought over it with Iron Man, but whatever. Would say assume I'm playing solo Iron Man and I took the recovery upgrade. I actually think you leave Hydra Prison in play. The recovery upgraded is kind of dicey for Iron Man most of the time because you normally want to stay in hero form as long as possible. And you already draw a ton of cards when you go to Alter Ego anyway, and when you stay in hero form. But removing War Machine from your deck is like strictly positive. I think you just leave him in the prison cell.
Yeah, he's yeah, that actually is probably one of the biggest benefits. Is there any other heroes currently where you'd be happy to see the signature go?
I don't think so. The Hellcat is integral to She-Hulk. Spider-Woman is amazing in Captain Marvel. Although if you're playing a duo of Spider-Woman and Captain Marvel, like 100% leave the Hydra Prison around. If you don't want to get the you'd need to be doing. You probably want to be doing the attack and the recover upgrades, I think, in order to justify it. But because the fraught one, the fraught one's so easy to trigger against Red Skull, and the defend one, if you're taking the defend one, you're probably defending, and thus it's really easy to trigger.
It's actually hilarious that I feel like this is a solution to the signature ally problem that some of the community has. Like, I just want to do this to all these problematic interactions so that you can always have a consistent deck with no bad draws. It's great with the Captain Marvel Spider-Woman. I'm going to try that.
Yeah. The biggest problem is I think that generally speaking, you want the improved upgrade, particularly on the fraught one. The fraught and defend ones, I think you want the improved ones. The recover one, I always forget it when I take it, but the improved recover is still pretty good. Although it's kind of awkward because normally you want to recover as you're flipping into Alter Ego, not as you're flipping into Hero, because then you've spent your whole turn doing whatever you needed to do, and then you flip into Alter Ego and then recover at the end of your turn, where you least likely need your hero stats. But the recover upgrade incentivizes you to have spent the turn in Alter Ego and then recover, or to recover on both turns, which is a lot of recovering and a lot more than I would normally try to do. And if you include downtime, you might not even be able to recover the 2 times because you can, like, if you have downtime plus the recovery upgrade, you have a minimum of 6 recover. That's a lot. And a maximum of, what is that? Maximum of 9 with Hulk. Also a lot. 8 with She-Hulk and Miss Marvel. Like, if you recover for 8 with Miss Marvel, you're not recovering the turn after. It's just not happening.
Well, the one that gives you the +4 hit points also is good for Gamma Slam because automatically your Gamma Slam is at 4.
Yeah, I do like that interaction. Although that's been removed a bit. The latest dev ruling has it adding after you set your HP. So if you're at max HP from the last thing, you'll still be at max HP. But I think She-Hulk wants to take the recover one for that exact reason.
Yeah, sorry, I just got a bit sad inside. That's the ruling, but okay. I was enjoying my Gamma Slams. As we wrap up this episode, do you have any final thoughts or impressions about campaign play? What do you think about it overall, and what are you hoping for in the next box?
I've really enjoyed it. Just overall, everything. Like there's always something that's leading to that's improving your chances against Red Skull or hurting your chances in the case of Absorbing Man, and I guess the Zola as well. But it's just it feels a lot better than I thought it was going to. I thought it would be a novelty I would try like once, but I've just because I normally sit there and play each scenario in order anyway, it feels so much nicer to play the campaign mode than to just play the scenarios not connected. And I think that's just been a really good experience overall. And I've done it a few times already, and I'm still most of the time sitting down and doing it as a campaign rather than doing it as standalones.
Yeah, I've definitely appreciated the pace also, because you can smash out a few in one evening. And for me, one of the biggest draws of this game is just how quick it can play, even 1 to 2 handed. And so, yeah, that's been the one thing I've really appreciated, is that I can get a narrative experience rather rapidly. Whereas with Arkham and Lord of the Rings, I've always found, one, I much prefer to play those multiplayer, but two, they take a little bit longer to do. And part of it is that the narrative and sort of, I guess, role play elements can be a bit deeper. And so there's a bit more investment there on those fronts. Whereas here, I know what I'm getting in for, and it's just a fun comic book romp from start to finish. So, yeah, I really enjoyed the campaign elements, and I'm really looking forward to what they do in the next box next year. All right, well, that wraps up our thoughts on the campaign elements of the Rise of Red Skull. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week to commence our series on the scenarios in the box. And after that, we'll be hopefully covering the 2 heroes that came with it. So thanks, everyone, for that, and we'll see you back next week.